What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man, and you all have been waiting for this for quite a while now. This is part 4 of What If Deku Was a Ice Wolf. Now, before I start this video, I have two things to say, and that would be one. In part 1 of Ice Wolf, I played a sound effect of a dog weeping, helping you guys the imagination of, when I said Izuku cries out like a wounded dog. People are thinking that I hurt my dog to get that sound effect, and I would just like to point out that I did not hurt my dog. I got that sound effect from a video from a dog who, actually it was a puppy actually, who was left alone and it was crying because, because it was left alone. Puppies want to be loved and stuff like that. And no, I would never hurt my dog. Let's go ahead and get that out the way. Two, this video is going to be a little different. Let's just say I made this script a little too long, and this is only half of what is going on in part 4. So basically, this is a part 1 to part 4, and I should be able to get part 2 of part 4 out soon, probably in like a few hours or so. And that's all I got. With that out of the way, this is What If Deku Was an Ice Wolf, part 4 of part 1. Hope everyone enjoys. Where we last left off, Shoto saw his long-lost twin brother Izuku with a group of bad guys. I'll bet you're all wondering, why was he with them, along with why did he kidnap his mother from the mental institute? Well, let's get into it. In this story, we will be going back into the perspective view of Izuku Todoroki, and where we last left off with him when he regained his memories after fighting against the horrific man-eating beast known as the Machu Picchu. Izuku was walking aimlessly through the woods, making his way back home. 100 questions filled Izuku's mind in that moment. Where am I? Is Shoto okay? How long has it been? After some time, Izuku found a lake. Feeling thirsty, he began to drink from it. Looking down to his reflection, he sees himself and is very surprised of how strong and tall he is. He speaks. Well, it's definitely been a long time. In the distance, Izuku heard faint howling, and all the memories from his previous life began to come back to him. He remembers them all. Khan, Sira, Shal, all of them. His family that he grew up with, happy, were just taken away from him. Izuku's heart began to fill with guilt, saying, if I'd just stayed there and fought, they'd still be alive. Izuku began to cry uncontrollably for a few minutes. After some time, he regained his composure and got up to his feet and said, I need to get back to my real family. I'd like to apologize. My brother's in the other room playing games. Izuku looks to himself at the reflection and said, but not like this, for he was out of clothing at the moment. Izuku looked around for something to cover himself up with. He came across the campgrounds. Izuku finds a family campsite. It seems that it was empty at the moment. He approached very cautiously, staying in his human form. He looks around for extra clothing to wear, but he only managed to come across a pair of jeans. Well, it's not much, but it will cover me good. Izuku then leaves the campsite before he is seen. Izuku walks alongside the road. Izuku isn't entirely sure how he knows, but where he's going, he feels like Shoto's in that direction, so he walks towards it. Cars pass Izuku as he walks, but during his walk, a black limousine stops right next to him. Izuku looks to the window as it slowly rolls down, revealing a man wearing a black suit. along with a mask that looks a little too big for his head. Eight thin silver pipes can be seen on the bottom center of the mask, with four on each side reaching at the back of Zed mask, while on the top half of the mask resembled that of a human skull, with four more silver pipes just at the top of the forehead of the mask reaching to the back as well. The man speaks. Hello there. Are you heading to Mosu City? Izuku, hesitant to say something, breaks the silence as he says, Yes, I am. The man speaks. Well, if you would like to, we can give you a ride and save you the walk. Izuku then said, We? In a questionable tone. Looking deeper into the car, he sees a boy around his age with pale blue hair and his skin with scratch marks visibly seen on his neck. They looked to each other for a second, but then the blue-headed boy then turned his direction out the window. Izuku, about to say no, says yes instead. Good, said the man with the mask. He opens the door to let Izuku in. Izuku enters. Looking around, he sees lights overhead, empty champagne glasses, and the seats were leather padded. And there was a third person in the car. This person had a head that resembled flames of purple, and his eyes were yellow. And he was wearing some sort of neck brace made out of metal. The limo starts moving, and the man with the mask speaks. So, to get introductions out of the way, this man here is named Korigiri. His quirk is called Portal. He can make a portal anywhere he wants to in any place. Hello, nervously said Izuku. And this, the man said with the mask, man's name is Shigaraki. His quirk is called Decay. Anything he comes in physical contact with, it either melts or turns to dust. Izuku waves his hands while saying hi, but Shigaraki just stares at Izuku with frustration. The man in the mask speaks once more, and I go by many names, but you can just call me All for One. Izuku speaks. Oh, well, it's nice to meet you all. I really appreciate your hospitality. And my name is Izuku Todoroki. The car goes silent for a few seconds, but Izuku speaks. So, All for One, what's your quirk? A scent of intensity fills the room. All for One speaks. Well, actually, I have an arsenal of quirks. I can mutate a part of my body and turn it into a weapon. I can even fly. I can also distort electrical fields, including the one in human brains, causing anxiety, confusion, make people pass out. Izuku feels a massive headache going on. His vision goes blurry, and then he passes out, leaning up against the back head cushioner. A few seconds of silence goes by. Shigaraki speaks. So, he's the long-lost son of Endeavor, huh? Should I kill him? Asked Shigaraki. All for One thinks for a minute and says, No, I have an idea, but let me explain it once we get to our location. All three men then look to Izuku. Some time goes by, and Izuku is still passed out. He was carried in by All for One into a random building that looked ran down. All the men entered inside, looking around. It appeared to have been an old abandoned bar. All for One speaks. I think this will be a great place to start our league. Korigiri, restore this place, make it look new. At once, said Korigiri. Shigaraki, follow me. Okay. In another room, there are a bunch of other chairs and tables for the bar. All for One approaches one of the tables and lays Izuku down on it. He speaks. All right, let's see what this boy has been through for the past 9 years. All for One then hovers both of his hands over Izuku's head, and then within a flash, blue and white light tendrils appear from All for One's hands and make a contact with Izuku's head. Izuku's body began to shake as All for One forcefully entered his mind. He saw Izuku's life, from when his father locked him in the back of the house, to when Shoto pushed him, to when he was rescued by the Grey Wolves, and the horrible thing that had happened to them. And in the final memory, he sees the monster that killed Izuku's wolf family. All for One speaks. Oh, so that's where you've been, Prototype. He then sees Izuku slaying the monster, and that's when they found him. He was all caught up with Izuku. Back in reality, Shigaraki speaks. Well, Master, what did you see? All for One puts both hands down to his lap. He then sighed and says, This boy has been through hell ever since he first got his quirk. His father locked him in the back of the yard like he was a dog. And about a year later, there was an incident with the boy's mother. She ended up hurting one of her sons, and somehow he felt what the other one had happened to him. Duh. And on the same day, Izuku and his brother Shoto tried to run away from the madness, but their father eventually caught up with them in the woods. And as they were being chased, Shoto got his foot caught in a trap and he wasn't able to run anymore. He made a split-second choice and pushed his brother away so that their father wouldn't take him back. Shigaraki gasped from what he was hearing. All for One continues. And it looked like here the boy lost his memories for the past years. He's been living in the woods with wolves. I gotta say, he looked more happy with them than he did with his real family. But one day, that family was taken from him, from one of our Nomus. The boy then went for revenge and was victorious. I guess during the battle, he got his memories back, and he was heading his way back home to see his family again. That's when we found him. Shigaraki has a face of amazement and says, You're saying he killed our Nomu? All for One nodded his head. Well, sir, if he's that powerful, he might be too much of a threat for us to live. Now, don't get me wrong. After hearing what you said about what he's been through, I have a soft spot for him. But I think we should terminate him. Shigaraki then reaches to touch Izuku's head. Wait, said All for One. He could be a big help to our cause. After seeing what his father did to him, I think we could use him and bring him to our side. But first, let's see what kind of quirk he has. All for One stands up, and the eyes from the helmet he wore glue the color red, looking to Izuku. He can see all of Izuku's quirks. Shigaraki speaks. Well, Master, what does he have? While still observing, All for One speaks. It reads here that he has 3 quirks. One is ice conjuration. It's very powerful. He can conjure up ice and turn it into a weapon, and he can even call a snowstorm in the warmest seasons. For the second one is a wolf quirk. Looks like here he could turn in and out of a wolf at will. And his physical attributes are increased greatly. In other words, he's really strong, even in his human form. Shigaraki speaks again. And for his third quirk, a moment of silence goes by and All for One speaks. Interesting. It seems here that his third quirk is called Tethered. Shigaraki asks, Tethered? What does that mean? All for One explains. It means connected or tied together. This actually tethers him and his twin brother Shoto Todoroki together, even with their quirks. That may explain how the other brother felt what had happened to him. Shigaraki ponders at the subject. So, I guess that means he actually has four quirks: ice, fire, wolf, and tethered. That's truly something special. Wow. A boy with multiple quirks. It sounds like the perfect Nomu. So, does that mean the other brother has this tethered quirk? And if so, does that mean he can change in and out of a wolf as well? All for One speaks. Well, it's definitely a possibility, but for now, we need to convince Izuku to be on our side. And I think I might have a solution to that. All for One stands over Izuku, putting both of his hands into the air, conjuring a ball of black ooze substance. Bringing it closer to Izuku's face, he uses one hand to open his mouth as he places the ooze into Izuku's mouth, making him swallow it. All for One speaks. There, that should do it. Shigaraki speaks. What exactly was that? All for One explains. I place a sort of substance to his brain, a specific spot called the prefrontal cortex. You see, Shigaraki, the prefrontal cortex is an important part of the human brain. It implicates in planning complex cognitive behavior as well as personality expression, decision making, and modern social behavior. And what I put inside this boy, well, let's just say the devil on his shoulder will be convincing him to do the bad things from this day on. Shigaraki's face gets a devilish grin, and he speaks. Good idea, master. All for One speaks. Thank you. Now, all we have to do is wait. Izuku, still passed out on the table. We slowly transition into Izuku's mind. The black ooze latches on to Izuku's prefrontal cortex, corrupting his mind. In Izuku's point of view, he is in a dark place. Looking around, he thinks that something's covering his eyes. He speaks. Wait, what's going on? Where am I? What happened? Looking around, Izuku spots a red light in the distance. He slowly approaches and sees that this light takes the shape of a small child that resembles him. Izuku speaks. Excuse me. Where am I? Izuku looks closer and he sees something weird about this figure. It was like the light that was surrounding it was like an aura of pure hatred. The figure turned around to face Izuku. He didn't quite understand what it was, but something about this figure scared Izuku to his core because he found himself unable to move. But he was able to speak. What the hell are you? What's going on? Izuku looks down to his legs and to his hands, and then he slowly looks back towards the figure, and the figure was looking towards him. Izuku felt his knees getting weaker, falling to the ground onto his knees. Izuku continues to stare at the figure and says, "Who are you?" The figure, now within arm's reach of Izuku, speaks as it reaches towards him and says in a very dark and demonish voice,
I am you, but soon I will be more.
With a jolt, Izuku woke up from his nightmare, taking a couple of deep breaths, trying to regain himself as if he was running a marathon. He looks around to see he's lying in a bed with a night shelf on his right and a glass of water on it with a note in front of it saying, "Please, don't be disturbed. You just passed out in the vehicle, and we thought that you could use a place to rest. Once you are ready, come on out and let's talk." Izuku looks around to the room he was in. It was like it was like a standard room with drawers, a TV, and a window. Izuku looked out of it and saw that it was dark and a crescent moon was out, and the stars were twinkling. Izuku looked down and saw that he was fully clothed. A few minutes of deciding whether to leave through the window or leave through the door, Izuku decided to leave through the door. Because as far as he known, that these people haven't done anything to him. They've shown him hospitality and they were even kind enough to give him clothes. But he was still very cautious. Before he could open the door, he takes a deep breath, twists the knob, and then pushes the door open, and was slightly blinded by the light bulbs, but his vision quickly returned to him, revealing a very well cleaned bar. There was a few booths lined up against the wall, and a pool table in an open part of the bar. And in another corner of the room, the bar itself, it had 7 chairs and a long line of a counter with alcohol on display. I'm not gonna fix that one. Walking out further, Izuku sees Korigiri cleaning a glass with a rag. He looks over to see Izuku and says, "Ah, Izuku, you're finally awake. Are you feeling okay? Do you need anything?" asks Korigiri. Izuku walks out, feeling a bit confused on why there was a bedroom in a bar, but he brushes it off, saying, "No, I'm fine, thank you. If you don't mind me asking, where am I right now?" Korigiri says, "Oh, well, you're in a bar, somewhat in midtown of Mosu City." Izuku realizes what he just said and speaks. "Oh, so we're in my hometown." "Yes, we are," said Korigiri. Izuku then says, "Oh, well, I guess I should be heading home. Oh, but it's late, and I don't want to wake anyone up. I'll have to wait till it gets a little more light outside." Korigiri then says, "Sounds like a splendid idea." Izuku looks around again and says, "Wait, where's All For One and Shigaraki?" Korigiri immediately responded, saying, "All For One is at the hospital, being checked out by the doctors, and Shigaraki is there with him in case needed." This took Izuku off for a second, with a concerned look on his face, and says, "Oh man, is he okay?" Korigiri then gives out a sigh and says, "Please, take a seat. I'll explain to you what happened to him." Izuku takes a seat, and Korigiri explains to what happened to All For One about his injury and the person who did this to him, making All Might sound like the bad guy. Now remember, Izuku was 5 when he started living in the woods, so he doesn't know All For One yet. Back in the conversation, Korigiri speaks. "So, that's why he needs to wear that mask, to help him with his medical problems." Izuku couldn't help but feel sorry for the man. He speaks. "Wow, that's so cruel. And you're saying that this All Might guy is considered a hero to the people?" "Yes," said Korigiri. Izuku continues. "Man, I guess things really have changed over my absence. Izuku thinks for a moment, and he remembers Shoto and says to himself, I wonder how he's doing. And Natsuno, and Fuyumi, and Toya, are they all okay? In the middle of thinking, the door to the bars were opened, and Shigaraki, along with All For One, entered. Izuku gets up from his seat and makes his way to the two, and asks, All For One, hey, are you okay? Korigiri told me about what happened. All For One says, yeah, I'm fine, Izuku. I assume he told you who did this to me. Izuku said, yeah, he did. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. All For One speaks. Yes, but don't worry. I'm recovering from it just fine. All For One puts a hand on Izuku's shoulder and says, Izuku, how about you and Shigaraki here get to know each other, while I go over and speak with Korigiri. Izuku looks to Shigaraki, who has a face that is a bit more welcoming this time. Says, okay, sure, how about we go talk over there? Izuku points to a table booth, and Shigaraki speaks. Okay. They both head to the table, and Izuku is the first to start a conversation, saying, So, Shigaraki, how did you end up meeting All For One? Shigaraki is silent, but then he sighs and says, My real name is Tenko Shimura. A long time ago, I was left in the dark. I was outcast. Nobody wanted to help me. I was 4 years old when it happened, when I accidentally killed my family. Izuku was shocked by what he was hearing, but he kept listening. Shigaraki continued, My dad never approved of me liking heroes, and whenever he did see me do so, he would punish me. The only people I had that truly cared about me were my sister, my mother, and my grandparents. But one day, just that one god-awful day, the family dog came to me for comfort. I reached out and I touched him with my 5 fingers, and then he, I disintegrated him. I didn't know what happened. I was scared, and I was confused. I didn't know what to do. But then my elder sister came to me. She heard me crying, and I touched her, and the last things that I heard fall from her mouth was a horrific scream of pain and agony. I watched her fall to the floor as she slowly began to disappear from my sight. I begged and I pleaded for someone to help her, to help me. But then my mom and my grandparents came, and I killed them too. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. And it was at that moment I realized it was my quirk, and it had activated. I sat there with the echoes of their screams in my head. I spent hours alone, but then he came back and saw the pile of ashes next to me. He slowly approached me and said, Tenko, where's your mother and sister? I looked in the pile of ashes that once was them. He got the picture and he slowly backed away from me. I got up, slowly walking towards him, wanting his help, but then he said, You did this, didn't you? You killed them, you monster! And that was the last straw. I had had it with this man's physical and mental abuse. I ran over to him and I ended it. The last thing that I remember was that I came in contact with the house and it started falling apart all around me. I ran outside and I was completely alone. I was an orphan for a while, living on the streets. I was begging for someone to help me, but most people just ignored my suffering. They all ignored me because they thought the heroes would help me. No heroes. No one ever came to help me. I felt like I was being punished, but then he found me. I was just about to give up on life. He once told me that we live in a society, and that's why I wasn't saved by those who chose to ignore my pain. But not all for one. He adopted me, and even gave me his last name, Shigaraki. And ever since that day, I owe him my life. And so, that's my story. Izuku was bewildered by Shigaraki's story. He even considered the fact that he could relate to him on a parental level, as they both had a slight despise for their fathers. Izuku speaks. Wow, your childhood was pretty tough, but I'm glad to see that you kept your head held high. As far as I see, you're not letting the past hold you back. It's all thanks to All for One. He's truly a great guy. It really upsets me that the people who try to do right in this world are always the ones to get screwed, while the injustice always comes out on top. Shigaraki nodded his head in agreement. For a while, the two talked, and Izuku told the story about his adventures living in the woods. Shigaraki was already aware of that, but he had to pretend he didn't. The two almost considered themselves as good friends. After talking for a long time, the sun was just rising over the horizon. Looking outside the window, Izuku saw that the clouds were a bright orange. This indicated that the sun was coming. Izuku speaks. Oh, it's morning already. Izuku stands up from his seat and calls to All for One across the room. All for One turns his head and he says, Yes, Izuku? Izuku speaks. I would like to take a walk around the neighborhood and hopefully, if the time is right, to go see my family again. All for One smiled under his mask and says, Of course. You know, you don't have to walk. I could just give you a ride there. Izuku smiles and says, No, I'm fine. Besides, I would like to take a trip down old memory lane. All for One speaks. Very well, but it may be getting a little bit winded out there. So why don't you go wear a hoodie and keep yourself warm? Sure, okay, said Izuku. All for One speaks. There should be some hoodies in the drawer where you were just sleeping at. Okay, thanks, said Izuku. He walks to the room and shuts the door. Not before telling Shigaraki thanks for talking with him. Izuku goes to the room. The door shuts. While he was gone, the villains were talking amongst themselves. Korigiri speaks. Are you really going to let him leave? Shigaraki gets in the conversation, saying, Yeah, what if he decides to stay there? Then he won't be help to our cause. All for One speaks. Don't worry, gentlemen. It'll be fine. Knowing Endeavor, he's full of himself and will not allow Izuku back into the household. And after seeing what had happened to Izuku, he's not going to welcome him back with open arms. Shigaraki speaks. Yeah, if anything, he's just a monster that needs to be put down. Izuku heard everything that they had said, and he feels a little bit down about what they were saying. Izuku speaks to himself. Is that true? Does Dad really hate me that much that he doesn't want me back? Izuku leans against the wall, thinking about all the things that his father had done to him, locking him up, treating him like a dog, calling him an abomination. Izuku was filled with anger, trying to fight the urge to punch something. Getting even more angry, he tries to fight the urge to change into a wolf and go wild. Izuku thinks to himself, wondering what's going on. All of this anger, and my head, what's happening? In Izuku's head, the mysterious substance is messing around with his psyche, making him think about the bad things that had happened to him. But there was a couple of things that Izuku thought about to keep him calm. That was his brothers and sister. Izuku regains his composure and says, "He's not my main concern right now. They are." Izuku manages to calm down and opens the drawer to get a hoodie. He looks inside to see that there is a variety colors of hoodies, all of them, each of them having different colors, almost all the colors of the rainbow. Izuku was about to grab the blue one when something in his head said, "Take the black one." Being a bit hesitant, Izuku went ahead and grabbed the black hoodie, putting it on. Before Izuku leaves the room, he takes a deep breath and says, "Just don't think about him." He opens the door to leave the room. As he's walking, he says to All For One and Korigiri and Shigaraki, "Hi, thanks again for your hospitality. I really do appreciate it." All For One says, "It's no problem. If you ever feel like you want to come back, just come on back. You're always welcome." Izuku smiles and looks to Shigaraki and says, "Hey, Shigaraki, you keep your head held high." Shigaraki just smiles and says, "Alright." And Korigiri, I'd like to thank you too. "It's no problem," said Korigiri. Izuku then walks out of the door and began to walk his way home. A few minutes later, Izuku thought that he should take a quick sightseeing of his old town. So far, he only came across abandoned buildings with windows barricaded with thin sheets of wood. There were a lot of people living on the streets. One stranger asked Izuku if he had some change to spare, but Izuku, being truthful to the homeless man, told him that he didn't have any money and that he was sorry. He continued to make his way into the city. Izuku finally found some buildings that people were in. He was amazed about how futuristic everything looked, and pro-heroes were everywhere. Izuku speaks. "Oh wow, this place looks amazing. Why isn't other places like this? Shouldn't there be pro-heroes patrolling everywhere and not just the popular districts?" While thinking, Izuku walked over a bridge, and out of nowhere he heard the sound of a girl screaming for help. Under Zed Bridge. Izuku quickly jumped over the bridge to get to the side of it to see what was going on. Izuku looked under the bridge and saw a girl standing there, visibly trembling, and what appeared to be some sort of giant man made of ooze. He listened closely, and the ooze man speaks. "Come here, little girl. I need to use your body. He's coming this way." The ooze man then forcefully grabs the girl by her waists and her legs. She screams for help as she shakes and kicks the villain, but her attacks are no effect towards him. Without even a second thought, Izuku ran in to save the girl. He screams at the top of his lungs, "Stop right there, you vermin!" The ooze man looks to Izuku and says, "Oh, what do we have here? A hero wannabe? Let's see what you got." The ooze dropped the girl, and he ran towards Izuku. Izuku then extended both of his hands out and starts throwing snow at the sludge villain. Excuse me. The sludge villain began to panic as ice began to form around his body, freezing him. He continues to run his way towards Izuku. But just before he could reach him, he was completely frozen. Izuku sees that he is now in suspended animation uses his enhanced strength to punch the villain into 1,000 pieces. Izuku stops in the sight view of the girl, who is laying on the ground, looking up to her hero. The first thing she noticed about Izuku was his snow white hair, and his eyes that resembled that of an emerald green gem. She takes a big exhale as her face begins to blush. Izuku kneels down to her level and offers her his hand. As he's doing this, he says, "Are you okay?" to the girl. The girl nodded her head and she takes Izuku's hand and gets up. And the first thing Izuku notices about this girl are her eyes. Her eyes are that of a bright blue sky, making it impossible to miss. Her long, beautiful blonde hair was flowing in the wind, and her glasses reflected the light of the sun into Izuku's eyes. Don't stare at that for too long. Izuku was flustered. "Wait, what is this feeling in my chest?" he said to himself. After a few minutes of staring at each other, Izuku speaks. Are you okay? Are you hurt? The girl speaks with a little bit of stuttering in her voice.
No, I'm fine. He just caught me by surprise. Thank you for saving me.
"It's no problem," said Izuku. "Now, you get as far away from here as possible. I better call the authorities and get him arrested." The girl then said,
Oh, okay.
She began to walk to the other end of the bridge, leaving it. Then she turned around and said,
Wait, my name is Melissa. What's your name?
Izuku smiles and says, "My name is Izuku." The girl then said,
Oh, well, thank you, Izuku.
She then waved her hands goodbye and and then she ran. Izuku was about to leave to go get a police officer, but then something happened that made Izuku stop. An echoey voice can be heard coming from the sewers. "I am here!" Izuku looks in the direction of the sound, and a giant man pops out from the manhole, saying, "Now prepare yourself, you vile, for I..." The large man stops talking when he sees that the sludge villain is rendered unconscious, with a boy wearing a black hoodie standing over him. "Oh, well, it looks like I don't have anything to worry about." Izuku looks in confusion, wondering who this man is. "Hello there, young man. Did you do this?" asked the large man. Izuku was extremely cautious and says, "Yes, I did. Who are you?" The large man then started laughing for some reason and says, "I am All Might, protector of the people and hunger for justice." Izuku was angered as he remembered that name. "Wait a minute. All Might?" said Izuku. Izuku had a flashback to when Korigiri said that name, the man who harmed All for One. The man that actually showed him kindness. Izuku just stands there with an angered look on his face. All Might sees this and says, "What's the matter, young man?" Izuku just continues to stand there, staring at All Might, not saying anything. All Might is a bit uncomfortable and says, well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to bottle up this sludge villain." Izuku just leans up against the wall, and he sarcastically says, "Sure, do whatever you want." All Might was unsure what was going on, but he proceeds to say, "Well, I'd better get going," as he bottles up the sludge villain. "You have a nice day, young man. Duty calls." Izuku stops leaning against the wall and says, "Wait, All Might." All Might then turns around and looks to the white-headed boy. Izuku stands there in the light of the sun at the end of the tunnel, shining on his back, with his face being covered by a shadow. All Might speaks. What's the matter, young man? The wind fills the tunnel and it whistles. Izuku takes a deep breath and he speaks. Why? All Might turns his head out of confusion, saying, What? Izuku then raises his voice, finishing his questions. Why did you hurt All for One? All Might's smile then disappeared, turning to a scared face. He speaks with a shaky tone in his voice. How do you know that name? Izuku was so frustrated at All Might, he was about to leave, but then All Might jumped in front of him. This takes Izuku off guard, and it upsets him even more. All Might speaks while he kneels down to Izuku's level, saying, Look, kid, I don't know what he's told you, but don't believe him. He is a very dangerous man, and you need to stay away from him. Izuku's face was still showing signs of aggression. All Might speaks. Where is he? He needs to be stopped. Izuku takes a quick glance down to All Might's stomach and punches him in his left side. This puts All Might in excruciating pain. He falls down to the ground on his knees with both of his hands in the spot that Izuku punched him. All Might begins to grunt from the pain as Izuku walks away, not saying anything, but All Might says one more thing before he leaves. Don't believe him. Izuku keeps walking. A few minutes after the incident with All Might, Izuku stops in front of a statue of All Might. Izuku speaks to himself. Why did I do that? He didn't really do anything to deserve that. I should have just walked away. Oh man, what is going on with me? What do I do? Izuku repeatedly paces back and forth in front of the All Might statue. Izuku's mind was running at 1,000 miles per hour, unsure of what to do. He sits down next to the statue and says, What is happening to me? After a few minutes, Izuku takes a couple of breaths. Izuku remembers what he came back home for. He speaks. I have to keep moving. Izuku looks around and sees a sign that changes from its advertisement and its products and the current time, which reads 12:24 p.m. Izuku takes a quick sigh and says, It's probably time to go. Izuku starts walking, but the thought of what he did still haunts his mind. But after a few minutes of walking, Izuku was able to forget about what he did. Looking over, Izuku sees his old house he used to live in. He was really hesitant about entering the premises, but his body moved on its own. A few feet away from the door, Izuku talks to himself. What am I gonna do? Listening to the sound of the rocks crumbling just underneath his feet. He speaks again. What changed with my brothers and sister? He gets closer and closer to the door and says, Is Dad gonna answer the door first? And Shoto. Izuku stopped walking for a second and has a flashback to what Shoto said back in the mountains. As long as we got each other, there's no way this world can get in our way. The flashback ends and Izuku says to himself, he said that, but the world did get in our way. Izuku even remembered the push that Shoto did to him that made him lose his memories. He feels around the spot of where his scar is just on the left side of his face, curving just around his eye, and says,
Shoto did this to me.
Izuku flinches as if he was trying to keep himself under control, yelling, No, no, he just wanted to protect me.
And that man, our father, the scum of the earth, that people see as a hero, but deep down underneath, he's a monster.
Okay, yes, he is a bit of a ruffian, but he's still my dad.
I want him dead.
Izuku quickly grabbed the hoodie and put it over his head, tugging down towards the ground. He says, Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Who are you? The voice stops, and Izuku took a couple of breaths. After a few seconds, he regained his composure and walks up to the door, his hoodie still over his head. Trying his best not to hesitate again, Izuku rings the doorbell. A few seconds of silence goes by. Izuku is reluctant to just walk away and not come back, as he was afraid of something happening next. Looking down to the ground, he was about to walk away when he heard a familiar voice on the other side of the door. Hang on, I'll be there in a second. Izuku looks towards the door and he makes out the voice of the girl. It's Fuyumi, said Izuku. Izuku straightens himself up, making sure that there is no dirt and debris on his clothes. He wipes down his shirt and his pants. Fuyumi opens the door and she speaks. Can I help you? Izuku was happy to hear his sister's voice again. He speaks. Yeah, actually, you can. Izuku takes down the hoodie from his head and says, You can start by hugging your long-lost brother? Fuyumi's eyes widen as she lets out a scream of joy. This frightens Izuku, but he stays. Fuyumi speaks, with excitement in her voice. Oh my god, Izuku! We've missed you so much! Fuyumi drops many tears, as Izuku hugs her tightly. After a few minutes of hugging, Natsuo enters the room and says, Hey, sis, what's wrong? Why did you scream? Fuyumi lets go of Izuku and jumps for joy, saying, He's here, Natsuo! He's here! He's actually here! Shoto was right! Natsuo's eyes widen as he sees Izuku's face. He slowly walks up to him and he notices the scar was on the left side of Izuku's face, and quickly brings him in for a hug. After a few minutes of hugging, Natsuo speaks. I've missed you so much, man. Izuku speaks. I've missed you too. Fuyumi gets in the hug, and hugs both of her brothers. It is truly a family moment. A few seconds later, Izuku asks, Oh, so where's Toya? Both of the siblings get a sad look on their faces, and Fuyumi speaks. Toya, he had an accident over 9 years ago, and he ran away. He's been missing for all those times. We don't know where he is. Izuku stands there, surprised, and very sad for missing his brother. Oh, he speaks. Oh no, that's terrible. What about Shoto? Natsuo speaks this time. Oh, he's out getting some groceries. Fuyumi here is about to make your favorite food, or we hope is still your favorite food. Izuku smiles and says, Oh wow, you can cook, sis? That's really awesome. Fuyumi says, Thanks, come on in, let's talk over some tea. Fuyumi grabs Izuku's hand and pulls him towards the living room while Natsuo pushes him towards the living room. A few minutes later, Izuku and Natsuo are sitting in the living room. Natsuo speaks. So, bro, what have you been doing for the past 9 years? Izuku says, I'll be more than happy to tell you, but I would like Fuyumi to be here to listen as well. Oh, that's okay, said Natsuo. Izuku then speaks. So, what are you doing nowadays, bro? Oh, well, I've been attending college for a little while now, and believe it or not, I still don't know what I want to do. I just go with the flow. That's great that you're in college, said Izuku. I can tell you're going to have a bright future ahead of you. Fuyumi comes in with the tea and gives Izuku a cup, saying, Here you go, Izuku. Thank you, sister, said Izuku. Izuku takes a sip from his cup and says, So, Fuyumi, what are you doing nowadays? Fuyumi says, Oh, well, I'm an elementary school teacher. Iju- Izuku speaks. Oh, really? That's great. You know, I'll bet those kids are lucky to have you. Fuyumi then says, Oh, yeah, they're good kids, and they learn so fast. Izuku then said, Oh, well, that's truly wonderful. I do hope nothing but the best for you guys. Both Fuyumi and Natsuo speaks, saying, Oh, thank you. Fuyumi then says, Oh, Izuku, I have to ask you, what do you know about your third quirk? Izuku thinks for a second and then he speaks. Well, I don't really know what my third quirk is. I think it might have something to do with that day of the incident with Mom, and that day I felt what Shoto felt. Also, that night with me and Shoto in the woods. You see, when we made contact with each other, we started glowing a bright white light. And I'm starting to think that Shoto and I are connected somehow. It's strange. For a long time, I always felt like he was nearby, but at the same time, I didn't know it. It was crazy. Oh wow, said Natsuo. Fuyumi then asks, So, where have you been for the past 9 years? What have you been doing, Izuku? Izuku was about to answer, but the moment was interrupted by Endeavor walking into the room, saying, Hey, where's Shoto? I can't find him. Fuyumi, Natsuo, and Izuku looked to Endeavor with a surprised look. All of a sudden, Izuku's head starts flooding with the horrific memories of his father and all the wrong things that he's done to him. Izuku calmly stands up and says, Hey, Dad. Endeavor looks. Endeavor lets out a sigh and says, What are you doing here? Izuku speaks. Well, that's a weird question to ask your son, don't you think? I've been gone for 9 years. I've missed my brothers and sister very much. Heck, I'd be lying if I said I didn't even miss you just a little bit. Fuyumi and Natsume will feel the attention growing rapidly. Fuyumi tries to defuse the situation, saying, Hey, Dad, how about you come over and join us for some tea? Endeavor immediately responds with, No. Now, I don't know what you came here for, but this is not your home. Endeavor walks up to Izuku and touches his shoulder, saying, I want you out of here. Izuku grabs Endeavor's hand and squeezes it. Endeavor then grunts from the pain because Izuku has super strength. Izuku then says, Please don't touch me. Fuyumi speaks. Izuku, wait, let him go. Hey, I was just standing here, said Izuku. Izuku then lets go of Endeavor. Endeavor then steps back from Izuku and said, How dare you? I'll have your head for that. Endeavor charges at Izuku with fire in his hands, but Izuku jumps over him and Endeavor hits the wall that was behind Izuku. Natsuo then steps in, saying, Dad, calm down. Just stop. Endeavor then gets up and pushes Natsuno out of his way into the ground. This angers Izuku and he says, Hey, don't touch him. Izuku charges at Endeavor and punches him in the gut. This temporarily incapacitates him, and he is on his knees. Izuku walks over to Natsuo and helps him up, saying, "Are you okay, bro?" Natsuo then says, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, we should probably just go." "Okay," said Izuku. "Come on, Fuyumi. Let's just go grab some lunch. We'll probably meet Shoto when we're outside or something." Endeavor then responds with an angry tone in his voice, saying, "No. How dare you walk into my home and think that you're a part of this family? I said it once and I'll say it again." Endeavor returns to his feet and yells, "You will never be a part of this family." This infuriates Izuku. He clenches his fist, but Fuyumi then steps in, saying, "Izuku, it's okay, just let me talk to him." Fuyumi then walks up to her father and says, "Dad, please just calm down. We just want to spend some lost time with our brother." Endeavor then gets up, angry from what Fuyumi just said, and he says, "He is not your brother." Endeavor then raises his hand to Fuyumi, and he smacks her across the face, knocking her glasses off as she trembles to the ground. Izuku sees this, and he grows angry. Izuku's eyes show signs of extreme anger. Izuku's eyes then glowed as snow began to fall from the ground outside. Natsuo sees this, and he looks to Izuku and sees his eyes. The storm began to rage outside. In the blink of an eye, Izuku attacked his father, kicking him in his left kneecap, making it bend the opposite direction it was supposed to be. He then proceeded to punch Endeavor so fast that Endeavor couldn't find an opportunity to fight back. As this happens, the snow from outside makes it inside the house as the window shattered. Izuku continues to punch his father over and over again. As the room began to fill with snow, blood began to spill from Endeavor's mouth and other wounds from his body. Izuku had no intention of stopping. He saw his father was too weak to try and fight back, so he stopped for a second. And so did the snow. He continues to stand over his father. Izuku took a couple of breaths, and he speaks. "Don't you ever touch her again, you bastard!" Endeavor looks up to Izuku with his one good eye. Izuku continues. "You made my life a living hell. I was just a boy, and you treated me like crap. All I wanted was love from you, Dad. But I finally see. There's no good man, let alone a hero, inside of you. You're just a monster that needs to be put down." Izuku then raises his arm into the air. He then uses his ice powers to conjure Wolverine claw-like tendrils just at the nape of his knuckles. He aims the claws at Endeavor as his one eye widens from the realization of his fate. Izuku then speaks. "I'll see you in hell, you bastard!" Izuku was about to stab his father, but he was stopped by Natsuo calling his name. "Izuku!" Izuku turns around to see his brother holding his sister, crying in his arms. Izuku then realizes his mistake, looking into a mirror that was mounted on the wall, looking at himself, only there was someone else. Izuku then gets off his father. Not wanting to scare his siblings anymore, Izuku raises his hands and says, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He walks his way out of the house and he goes through the back door. When he looks down, he sees the chains his father used on him at the age of 4. The voice inside Izuku's head spoke.
"Take the chains."
Izuku pulled the anchor from the ground and grabbed the chains and stuffed them in his front pouch pocket of his hoodie. Izuku walks around the house, the jingle jangles of the sound of the chains hitting each other stuffed in his pocket. As he makes his way to the driveway, he heard the voice again saying,
Excellent, excellent, just excellent. You did that all on your own. I didn't even say anything to initiate that situation. You wanted to kill him, but your brother stopped you. You really are an animal. It's in your blood.
Izuku puts the hoodie over his head and yells out loud, "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" As he says that, he conjures a giant glacier of ice just in front of the house. Izuku feels like he can't control himself anymore and says, "What is wrong with me?" He runs, barely noticing that he shoulder bumped into someone, and said, "Sorry." He runs, not knowing that he accidentally shoulder bumped into somebody, but he didn't look back to see who it was. He ran while he said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going." All Izuku heard was faint words saying, "It's okay." Izuku opens his eyes and realizes that he was glowing. He thinks to himself, "Shoto?" Izuku starts running. After a few minutes of running, he stops and enters an alleyway, speaking to himself. "I can't go back now. I can't go back now. My goodness, what the hell is going on with me?" Out of nowhere, Izuku feels a bad headache happening. He leans up against the brick wall as he slowly slides down. And then he hears the ominous voice again.
Like I said, I am you. And right now, I am becoming you.
Izuku passes out from the pain. A few hours have passed. It's dark. The moon is out. Izuku still in an alleyway. Korigiri opens a portal next to him, with All For One emerging from it. He picks up Izuku and takes him through the portal back to the bar, where Shigaraki awaits him. When he appears with Izuku in his arms, he says, "Oh, so you were right." All For One speaks. Now, let's see why he was where he was. All For One invaded Izuku's mind and saw what Izuku did to Endeavor, but also heard the harsh words that Endeavor said to his son when he was there. When he sees everything, he tells the rest of his colleagues about what had happened and what Izuku had been through. Shigaraki speaks. "That's truly tremendous. He beat him within an inch of his life? He'll be out of the hero business forever now." Korigiri speaks. "What kind of father hits his child for wanting to spend time with a long-lost loved one?" All For One speaks. "How the hell is Endeavor the #2 hero? It truly makes you wonder what this world is truly becoming. A corrupted society where only the big people, such as quote-unquote heroes, are seen as the good people. But really, they're only doing this for the fame, not to protect people. And I didn't tell you this, Izuku saved a girl today from being kidnapped, and there were no pro heroes around to help her. After he saved her, he came across All Might, so he knows that I'm in town. So we're gonna have to be more careful." But that's hardly a problem, because Izuku here punched him in the spot where I destroyed his trachea and left him in pain. They all give out laughing and almost woke up Izuku, but they all stopped. All For One takes Izuku to his bed and leaves the room and talks with his comrades. I think after experiencing such a thing, I think he'll be on board to help us with our cause, to bring heroes down. But before we can get into that, he needs to understand his third quirk. A few hours have passed. In Izuku's perspective point of view, he is back in the dark place. He looks around and says, "No, no, not here again." Izuku heard the ominous voice again, saying,
Turn around.
Izuku slowly turned around to see the child. The childlike figure has changed into a wolf cub, sitting there with the red aura surrounding it. Izuku wanted to ask the same question again, but he already knew the answer he was going to get. So this time, he decided to ask a different question. What is your purpose? The small dog figure just sits there for a few seconds, and then it responds, saying,
My purpose is to make you into me.
Izuku then says, and what exactly are you?
I am your negative thoughts. I am the devil on your shoulders. But more importantly, I am you.
Izuku then realizes what's going on and says, it's you. You're the one who's been messing with my head. Saying those things that I would never say, doing those things that I would never do. The ominous figure starts laughing maniacally, and it speaks.
That's when you're wrong. All I did was told you to do those things. But that one with your father, that was all you. I didn't do or say anything to initiate that situation. You did that. You were just as ruthless, and it was such a fun thing to watch. I can't wait for it to happen again.
Izuku felt like his mind was going to break into two, for it was true. What he did to Endeavor, he did it all on his own. He wanted to stab him. It wasn't this doppelganger of Izuku. He speaks. No, 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 this won't happen again. God knows what's happening to my father right now. What I did to him. The ominous figure speaks.
Oh, it's okay. Pretty soon, you won't have to worry about that.
Why is that? Asked Izuku. Even though the dog figure has no face, a devilish smile can be seen glazing across its face. It speaks.
Because once I kill Shoto, it's just going to be me and me alone. You will be gone, and I will consume your mind.
Izuku grows angry at this being and says, No, I won't let you hurt him. Izuku charges at the dog, but then all of a sudden Izuku fell to the ground as if gravity was pulling him downwards. He hits the floor, unable to get up. The small wolf approaches Izuku, and when it gets closer, it got face to face with Izuku and says,
That's right. Keep fighting. 'Cause the more you fight, the more of me you become. And don't worry, you won't remember any of this in the real world when you wake up.
The small wolf figure then began to grow into a fully grown adult wolf and said,
I'll see you later.
The wolf figure then opened its mouth and bites Izuku on his face, waking him up. Izuku quickly sits up while taking a couple of breaths, as if he was just drowning and he managed to get out of the water. He looks around. It's the same room as from the first time he woke up. What? But How did I get here? Izuku cautiously gets out of the bed and makes his way to the door that leads to the bar. He opens the door slowly and hears Korogiri closing up shop. Thanks for coming. Have a nice day. Izuku slowly walks out of the room as Korogiri makes his way back behind the counter. When he turns around, he sees Izuku. He jumps from being spooked. He then says, Izuku, oh my goodness, you scared me. Izuku walks up to the counter and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He sits down and Korogiri sees something different about Izuku. His eyelids were drooping as if he hasn't been getting enough sleep. Korogiri then asked, Are you okay, Izuku? Izuku sighs and asks, How did I get here? Korogiri then says, Oh, well, we came across you again, but you were passed out in an alley. We didn't want to just leave you there, so we picked you up and took you back here. We thought someone had hurt you, but thank goodness we found you with no injuries. Izuku looks to Korogiri while smiling and says, Thanks. You guys saved me again. Izuku sighs while looking down to the ground and says, Man, this city has gotten smaller. There are a lot of homeless people living on the streets. And now, this city is changing me. Just what is happening? Izuku gets a headache and Korogiri offers him a bag of ice. Thanks, said Izuku. He places the bag of ice on his head. After a few minutes, Korogiri speaks. Listen, Izuku, I understand what's going on. Izuku looks up to Korogiri. Korogiri continues to speak. It's only been one day, and you're having a hard time adjusting to the new environment. But Izuku, I have to ask you a question. Do you feel more like a man or a wolf? You see, basically what I mean by that is that I'm asking if you prefer to live in the woods as a wolf or living in society as a man, living in a more or less ordered community. Izuku thinks for a moment and he says, I'm not very sure what I am. Korogiri speaks. Well, that's the point of life. To find your place in this world, or find happiness the best way that you can. Izuku smiles from this advice and says, Yeah, you're right. Now, Izuku, I hope you don't mind me asking, but why were you passed out in that alleyway? Asked Korogiri. Izuku puts the ice pack on the counter as he sighs. He says, It's okay, I'll tell you. And so he did. Izuku told Korogiri about what happened between him and his father, and what his father did to initiate the situation. Korogiri speaks. Oh, wow. That's truly horrible. He didn't even say hi when he saw you? Izuku says, No, as he lets out a deep sigh. Korogiri continues. Oh, well, I'm sorry you went through that. You're just a kid. A father shouldn't have to treat you like that. Izuku lays his head down on the counter, thinking about what he put his brothers and sister through. Fuyumi, Natsuo, Shoto. I'm sorry. Izuku starts crying. Korogiri puts a hand on Izuku's head, comforting him. It's going to be okay, Izuku. If you want to, you could just stay here and we can just take care of you. Izuku glances up and smiles, saying, Thanks. I really do appreciate everything you guys have done for me. And Korogiri lets out a small laugh. All of a sudden, the phone rings. Korigiri picks it up. Hello? Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. I'll open a portal. Korigiri hangs up the phone and he walks over to an open area of the bar. Is everything okay? Asked Izuku. It's okay, said Korigiri. He then opens a portal right in front of him. Izuku is surprised because this is the first time he's seeing Korigiri use his quirk. All for One and Shigaraki emerge from it. Izuku gets up from his seat and he walks over towards the two. Hey, All for One, Shigaraki. It's good to see you again. All for One speaks. Well, it's good to see you too, Izuku. Glad to see you weren't hurt when we found you. You had us worried there. Izuku scratches the back of his head while saying, yeah, thank you. So, where did you guys come from? Shigaraki speaks. We were just meeting up with some old friends of ours, talking about the good old times, that good stuff. Izuku speaks. Oh, well, that's nice. All for One got in the conversation saying, so Izuku, why were you passed out in that alley? Izuku took a deep breath and explained everything to them about what had happened. And after a few minutes, All for One speaks. I see. That's terrible. Shigaraki speaks. I'm sorry that happened to you. Izuku says, it's okay, but I'm afraid I'll never be able to face my family again. After what I did. How could I? All for One put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, it's okay, Izuku. Korigiri, Shigaraki, can you leave me alone with Izuku for a while? They both leave the room. It's just Izuku and All for One. All for One speaks. Now, Izuku, I haven't been completely honest with you. Izuku looks up in confusion. All for One continues. You see, the reason I came to this town is because I'm building an army to take down All Might. For you see, Izuku, we've been lying to you. A long time ago, when I got my quirk, I had a brother who I thought was quirkless at the time. He never agreed to my motives, and so, to make him submit to me, I gave him a quirk that could stockpile in power. But little did I know that he actually had a laid dormant quirk that can be passed down to others. Those two quirks fused together, making a new quirk that he named One for All. Izuku sits there in amazement about the story, but mostly confused. He then said, well, what were your motives at the time exactly? All for One, under his mischievous mask, smiles and says, you see, Izuku, when I got my quirk, I was considered the most powerful being on Earth. So, I used it, and I stole quirks and climbed the ranks. And soon enough, I became the ruler of Japan with an iron fist. Let me ask you something. What do you think truly keeps society under control nowadays? Is it law or is it order? Izuku sits there thinking, unsure of how to answer the question. All for One speaks. Well, I'm going to tell you. It's order. When it comes to keeping everyone in line, it's always the ones with the most power to come out on top. Show strength, and they will submit to you. Show no fear, and they will fear you. Show no mercy, and the world is yours. Izuku thinks to himself for a moment. and says, "So, you're no good man after all. I was just a fool to trust you. All Might even warned me." Izuku gets a flashback to an injured All Might saying, "Don't believe him." Back in reality, Izuku speaks. "So, what happened to your young brother?" All for One laughs and says, "Well, when I activated his quirk, he tried to stop me. I defeated him and I locked him away. But little did I know, he passed his quirk down without me knowing, and for a long time it had been growing, passing down from person to person, until I finally caught up with the seventh holder, a woman named Nana Shimura. But like the ones before her, she had failed to bring an end to my reign of terror, as they called it. But, like the others before her, she failed and met her end. I thought I'd brought an end to this one-for-all quirk, but once again it slipped through my fingers, and the eighth wielder of one-for-all moved to America. And after some time, after honing his power, he came back. We brawled, but by the end, it was a draw between both of us. We destroyed each other's bodies beyond recognition. Though he may have taken my face, I took his respiratory system." Izuku speaks, "And who is the eighth wielder of One for All?" A moment of silence fills the room, until All for One speaks. "That would be All Might. The hero you punched in the exact same spot where I wounded him." Izuku's world stopped as he sits there in disbelief. "No, it can't be," said Izuku. "I trusted you, and you tricked me into thinking All Might was evil, but really, it's you. Why? Why did you choose me?" All for One speaks. "Because, Izuku, you are truly powerful and very naive. I couldn't let an opportunity like that slip through my fingers again, and I want your help to kill All Might." Izuku quickly stands up, saying, "No, no, I won't help you. Izuku gets a massive headache. All for One explains, "Oh, did I forget to mention when we first met, I installed a sort of parasite into your prefrontal cortex. Right now, it's corrupting your mind. You can try to fight it all you want, but in the end, you'll submit to it. It will kill your brother Shoto, and you will be gone, and it stays forever." Izuku falling over himself, trying to fight back the parasite in his head, falling to the floor onto his knees. He lets out a loud scream. All for One speaks. "It's like I said before. Show no mercy, and the world is yours. Now, I ask you one more time, Izuku. Will you help me kill the symbol of peace?" Izuku slowly begins to stand up while looking at the ground. He says, in a very quiet tone, "Yes." We fade to black and reappear with Izuku standing in the position of attention. Straight and tall, All for One explains to Izuku about his third quirk. And this is where I'm going to take a